Okay, so last week we talked about embeddedness, this idea of virtual embeddedness and trust, right? Making sure we have a decent looking website, a logo, we have social handles, we have Google My Business. Has anybody set up a Google My Business by chance?
I think I saw it a while ago, but it's there, yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're like on Google Maps, like people can kind of find you?
I think so. I think if you type it in, it'll show up there, yeah.
Sweet. All right. And this is really, really important for anyone doing like service-based businesses. If you're going to be selling anything locally like that, definitely set up a Google My Business. If you need to use a phone number for it, Google also offers a Google Voice service. So that's voice.google.com. It's a free phone number. I don't think there's very many 239s left, and I think there's limited 954s, but there might be some sort of Tampa numbers and a little bit north of here. But definitely recommend getting a Google Voice. It'll give you that filter from your personal phone if you're going to try putting that out there in the world. Okay. All right. So search engine optimization. It's a lot of hype about this concept, but a lot of lack of knowledge on what it actually is. Does anybody know what it actually is? What is search engine optimization?
So what I think it is...
Yeah, so making sure that your website is sort of designed and optimized for Google to rank it. That's the key, right? Google ranking is what we're talking about when we're talking about search engine Google optimization. We want to be the first page when somebody Googles the thing that we have to offer, right? So how do we do this? This is an example. Regrained is a website that repurposes spent grain from the beer making process, and they turn it into pasta, they turn it into energy bars, things like that. Cool concept. These guys got started on a micro-funding platform not too long ago, and they actually get a lot of their traffic from their blog. Their blog is where they have really good information about recipes for people to find. Like, so this particular thing is like making a soup broth with like the leftover junk in your fridge. It's a way for people to find their website that they wouldn't have otherwise found them, right? Like I might not look up like, okay, I want to buy the thing that's got some spent beer grain in it. I don't know why I would search that as an individual user online, right? But I might be interested in turning some of the vegetables that are kind of going bad in my fridge into a soup broth or into something usable, so I don't waste them, right? So people are finding what Regrained is by searching for recipes potentially, right? So if you're starting a business that may have a specific intended audience, think about the kinds of things that they may be searching for that may not be your business per se, but they may be relevant to things that your business might offer, right? So find ways that you can sort of move them from a recipe, in this case, maybe it's a how-to, maybe it's a tutorial, things like that, to the business that you're offering, right? So you do like glasses cleaning, right? So if we had a website, like what could be an interesting way to capture people in a blog? You might even talk about like the importance of keeping your glasses clean, okay, right? Yes. The importance of driving with clean eyewear, mm-hmm, right? Like these are things that might sort of pull users into your website that may not have otherwise found their way there, definitely, right? So kind of think outside the box when we're trying to, because everything's like you can find relative interests around your business. That's what we're trying to use to get people to your website. We're going to use the context of what it is that you're offering in those articles. Okay. So the next thing is looking at Google Trends. So I looked up upcycling on Google Trends, and there is a little bit of this. A lot of it's like, what is upcycled food? So a lot of it's kind of confusion as to what it might even mean. You can compare search terms in Google Trends, and I looked up recycled just to see, okay, what's the difference between these two, and it's pretty substantial. Like relative to upcycle, recycled is pretty much the dominant figure here. But what's interesting, start looking at different related queries. What I like to do is change this from the past 12 months to the past 5 years or since 2004, and we can start to see some patterns here. I see a spike, and that spike is every April. Why might recycled spike in every April? Earth Day, yeah. So Earth Day happens in April, so recycled tends to spike in April. Now the weird thing was that upcycled didn't do that. And it means that there's probably an interesting dissociation between upcycled and recycled. People just don't know what it is, so they're not searching it. So it might be a fundamentally flawed search term to use on your website if you're trying to get people looking at recycled things to get to the website. So using the word recycled on their website would be really smart for them to use, because that's what people are actually searching for. So use Google Trends to see when things are trending, right? So if recycled is part of your business, you definitely want to be using that search term in April, right? It makes a lot of sense to have that in your social media posts, in your blog posts, in your videos, anything that you're going to have out there, because that's what people are actually searching for. What I'd like to do really quick is get you all onto ads.google.com. This is Google Ads platform. We're not going to buy any ad campaign at the moment, but what we're going to do is we're going to use this platform to help us identify keywords that we may be able to use functionally in our blog content, in our social media content. And in order to do this, we're going to set up an account in expert mode. So if you go to ads.google.com on your computer, we're going to go ahead and create an account if you haven't done one already. And before you actually commit to there's like a thing where you can put in your website information, there should be a small like hyperlinked text at the bottom that says switch to expert mode. That's what we're going to click on. And you should see that when you get to ads.google.com. So now we know what SEO is, search engine optimization, and we know roughly the ways we can use some of these tools to optimize ourselves within the search engine. Now I want to talk about what backlinking is. Does anybody have an idea or have heard this term before? Yeah, so it's when another website, particularly a bigger website, actually talks about your website on their website, and vice versa, right? So if you link back to those, it's basically cross-traffic, right? And your score, if you will, for backlinking goes up if the site that's recommending you or has you linked on their website is large and has large user volume. So things like, so this is kind of an interesting example. If you're going to post a blog article about how to run a marathon, I would reach out to a Fitness Weekly or a fitness blog website that's a little bit bigger or a lot bigger than yours and see if they can promote it or put it on their website, right? It doesn't really cost them anything to do this other than to put it on their website, but this can be really, really beneficial because the more of these you have, right? This is kind of like a spider web of companies and websites that are promoting your content, the easier it is for your website to be ranked. One of the best ways to start this process is to actually use one of the biggest backlink generators in the world, and that is Wikipedia. So how many people here have ever edited Wikipedia? All right, today's your lucky day. We're gonna edit some Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is open source, so anybody can get in there and edit it, obviously. But you can create your own business page on Wikipedia. Talk about the products and services that you offer. You can edit other people's Wikipedia. So if you wanted to say like, hey, my business came out of FGCU, I'm gonna hop on FGCU's Wikipedia page. I'm gonna put a little blurb about my cool business that came out of the university's programs. You can say that George Washington had, lizard legs or something. As long as you have a source and other people agree with you, then it'll get approved. I highly doubt that will get approved, but you can do it and it can be kind of temporary. But you can always link your website on here, right? So maybe not FGCU, but maybe you do create a Wikipedia page for your business explaining what the product is, what the service is, and link it to your website. And then voila, you now have one of the largest websites on the planet backlinking to your website. So utilize it. It's a free resource and it's something that anybody can do. So going back to Regrained, their SEO is pretty darn good, right? They've done a pretty good job of getting lots of good blog content out there. They've got a lot of good social content. They do have people backlinking. They've got Crunchbase, specialtyfood.com. So these are a lot larger websites talking about them that they've probably reached out to and had them write small articles about. all great ways to backlink and then get them higher up on the search engine that they'd like to get on. So analytics, we're gonna switch gears a little bit. Does anybody have any questions about any of the stuff we just went over with SEO or backlinking before we get into that? No? All feeling pretty good? Cool. All right, so analytics. So this is Google Analytics. I do recommend setting up an account. You don't have to, but it can be really valuable, and it's something that I highly recommend everybody do, because at some point you're going to want to know what people are doing on your website. This gives you a lot of really great insight, and it'll tell you what things might not be working on your site or might be working really well that you want to replicate. And this is FGCU's actual Google Analytics site. This is from about a year ago, so some of this data might be a little bit older, but it's all still really relevant. So what I'm going to do is kind of show you some of the major tabs here. So you can see things like session processes. So like this is looking at country and where people are typically coming from. Obviously, a good chunk of people going to FGCU are coming from the United States. The next thing they end up at is index. This is the home page. They might go to Canvas, they might go to email, they may go to Gulfline, and there's about a little bit less, or a little over 100 other pages that they end up going to, right? This is on their first session. We can change this to anything we want. We can look at types of users, we can look at behavioral things, we can look at acquisitions, so like the source. So in this case, I switched it up to source because I want to see if they come from Google, what do they end up going to? If they go direct to the website, what's the first thing they go to? So like some people go straight to Canvas, right? So that's showing them going straight to Canvas. We got some people going straight to email, and you can see relative amounts of people that go from this particular source to a starting page, first interaction, second interaction, right? So Google versus direct, these kind of things. Let's see, I'm gonna fast forward here. So next is looking at our source medium. So like finding out where, in this case, I'm going to switch this up to bounce rate and new users. So these are new people coming to the website, and the bounce rate. What is bounce rate? Exactly. So like a bounce rate is if somebody comes to your website, they see what you have to offer. Maybe they don't even see what you have to offer. They get to your website, but they immediately leave. They're off. That's a bounce. And FGCU has a 28.32% average bounce rate, meaning that 28.32% of people that go to the FGCU website immediately leave. Okay, there's a lot of different reasons for this. And what I'd like to do is kind of see if you can find some of the reasons why bounce might be higher or lower depending on different circumstances. So if somebody Googles or goes to Bing and searches for FGCU, they are 12% less likely to bounce if it's Google, and 43% less likely to bounce if they're coming from Bing. Why is that? So people are bouncing, right? They're coming to the website, immediately leaving. If they come from Google, though, they are 12% less likely to bounce. They're still going to bounce. We still have a pretty decent bounce rate here, but they're less likely to bounce if they Googled FGCU. Like when we go to fgcu.edu, like how many people actually type that into a URL, like fgcu.edu? So like you do it sometimes, right? Like, but the majority kind of just Google it real quick, and then they click on the first link that pops up, right? So they're getting a pretty good bounce rate there because like people are actively trying to get on the site for some reason. Well, let's see, what about direct? So like if you do go directly to fgcu.edu, turns out you're 30% more likely to bounce. Why might that be? Yeah, exactly. How many people have used a computer on campus? Like not your personal one, but like one like in the lab or something. So when you go to Chrome, what's the first website that pops up? So it's like Apps Anywhere. It's part of the FGCU website, right? So what do you do immediately after you open that browser? You go somewhere else, right? Yeah, so you bounce. Like it looks like you bounce because you immediately went to a different site, right? So our bounce rate's a little bit higher when we look at direct searches. Now over here we've got something really, really interesting. A 216% more likely to bounce associated with a Google ad. That's weird. Why is that? Yeah, so it could be that people are just kind of popping in to see what it is, and then they're like, oh, this is not for me, this is not what I wanted, they leave, right? What's that mean though, for the person running the ad? Like what's that mean for FGCU?
Validates that people are going on.
People are going on it, but they're leaving, but so if I'm running an ad and people are bouncing on my ad, what does that mean? Something's off, right? Yeah, exactly. It's probably not so targeted, or it's not targeted well, right? So let's dive a little bit deeper and see why this might be. Let's see. So I'm going to go check out the campaign. I'm going to see if we can see the keywords. So we have two campaigns. They're spending about $640 in a week-long period. Let's open up the keywords. Okay. So this is kind of tiny. So if you want to come up to the screen and take a look at this, just don't touch it because it will switch to the next slide. But we have a couple interesting keywords here that, I don't know, do they make sense? Resources. Does anybody remember what these were? Remember we went through the business model canvas and we looked at like all the major like sort of boxes. Does anybody remember what resources was?
Intellectual property, right?
Yep, intellectual property, human capital, right? Human resources, right? It's got it right in the name.
Right.
What about knowledge? Knowledge. Anything else?
Just like resources that would like help keep your business healthy, like maybe money.
Yeah, money, capital. Yep, absolutely. Any other ideas? It's pretty broad, right? Resources are things that you need in a business to keep it operational, right? Like if you're a physical location, a building might be a resource for you, right? A room, a place to do business, right? If you're looking for a manufacturer, like if you're making a product, a good place to check out is thomasnet.com. This is it's kind of a global network, but it's mostly U.S.-based manufacturing resources. You can even find stuff like here in Florida, so like kind of right in our backyard. It's kind of like a social network for manufacturers, and you can find them right through here. So if you are in that product space, definitely take a look at this. This kind of constitutes it's a link to potential partners, but it's a great resource. If you are interested in finding costs for things or looking at potential large-scale suppliers, Alibaba.com is a good place to go for some of these. AliExpress is pretty good if you're just looking for like one or two of a particular type of product. It's kind of like the Chinese version of Amazon. You can usually find the same product on Amazon for like pennies on the dollar. So if you're looking for an interesting way to save a bunch of money, this is also pretty good to look at. They don't have 2-day shipping, but it is really, really cheap. If you're looking for software development, I do recommend trying to build the front end, if you will, like the user interface yourself. Bubble.io, Figma, these are all great resources for actually starting the development. This would be a resource for you. And then thinking about how you can get some of this stuff built out more in depth, we think of the partners, right? How many people here are software engineers? Only one person was supposed to raise his hand, but he didn't, so all good. It's okay if you're not a software engineer. You don't have to be one to develop an app, right? There are tons of really good partners out there that we can find to help us with that. So if we use platforms like Bubble.io, like Figma and things, oh, you're good. We can find people to do some of the major back-end stuff, right? Like the Java stuff, the PHP, iOS development. A lot of that can be done through developers on Upwork for fairly little money. Same thing with the software engineers right here on campus. You might be able to go talk to some of the professors that teach software engineering. Your project might even be something that they can bring into a classroom. So utilize the resources here to find partners, because this can be really, really effective at reducing the cost that you're going to incur when you're doing the development. This costs a little bit more than this, right? This could be service learning. This can be potentially kind of more minimum wage, if you will, like initial contract payment. But this is a really good way to get something started. If you're thinking about building out something hardware related, so something more of a product-based thing, bioengineering is probably one of the more well-rounded product design groups. So if you wanted to build something out, that would be a good department to talk to. Dr. Geiger, Dr. Laura. There are a couple others over there that might be able to get you connected with some bioengineering students that might be able to help. And there's a couple of different websites that you can do. Florida Enterprise, or Enterprise Florida, has a resource of local manufacturers that you may be able to use to get you off the ground. It may not be like full-scale manufacturing where we're doing like tens of thousands of units out of China, but it might be able to get you to that first couple that you can start actually building and getting out into the world. Finally, what I want to talk to you guys about is costs. Does anybody remember the 3 types of costs that we talked about back in the BMC workshop? It's like, wait, it's so long ago.
Fixed and variable costs.
Fixed and variable, those are 2. What was one more?
Startup costs.
Startup costs, yeah, that's like the important one. That's why everyone joins Runway program, right? What are startup costs?
I feel like making your MVP.
Yeah, it could be something as simple as like I need a couple bucks to like maybe $100, $200 to make my first MVP, right? Or my first prototype. What's that? Yeah. Like initial Shopify costs, yeah, for like the first year, first 6 months, whatever that might look like, right?
LLC filing.
LLC filing, yep. Absolutely, yep. Anything that you need to get started, right? Could be rent for first like month or 2, could be down payment on a vehicle, could be like there's all kinds of things that you can use for those initial startup payments. How about fixed costs? What are those? I have it on the screen, but if anybody remembers what their specific ones might be. Fixed costs are those things that don't change. We have to pay them regardless, right? Rent, website, right? You've got to pay that every month. Domain, got to pay that once a year. Things that you got to pay regardless of whether or not you make a dime, that's a fixed cost, right? These things are usually what we like to reduce as lean startups because these things can kill a big business, right? Anytime you have fixed costs accumulating, your overhead's increasing. Variable costs. Anybody remember what this was? I have cost of goods sold. This is also kind of a interesting concept. Anybody have an idea of variable costs? Exactly, it changes with volume. Yep. Yeah, so if like to your point, like if you sell a particular dish once, it only costs you whatever percentage of that dish is, right? But if you sell that dish 100 times, it's the same percentage of the dish, but it's now multiplied by 100, right? So my challenge to you guys over the next week is to really figure out what your variable costs are going to be and what your fixed costs are going to be. The variable costs are really important because we're going to start plugging these into a calculator next week that's going to kind of determine how profitable your business may be over time, right? We already covered startup costs. So like I said, try to figure out costs. If you have questions, see me. I'd be happy to kind of walk you through this, especially if it's product-based services I can help with too. But those products are typically a little bit harder to price out. Lock in your social media handles if you haven't already. Get your Google My Business if you haven't already. Make sure your domain's purchased if you haven't already, right? 12 bucks to get it. Have a list of some of the resources and partners that you're going to need. This is going to really help you figure out like what next steps are after we do figure out our financials. And we'll walk through the financials step by step, so don't worry about like not knowing the math. We'll kind of work through that together.